Because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear,
This guy is a homophobe, a xenophobe. He's a racist, a misogynist, and he shows it every day.
And it was the same old show. The divisiveness and the disrespect. And let me just say, the American people deserve better.
The contrast could not be more stark. On the one hand, you have a radical left puppet candidate who is fake, fake, fake. And on the other hand, you have a president who will fight, fight, fight for America.
That was a collage of just some of what Donald Trump had to say in Chicago, Kamala Harris's response, J.B. Pritzker's response, and then Donald Trump in Pennsylvania last night. Welcome back. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, and the back and forth in national politics obviously leading things as you've got the November 5th general election just around the corner, and prospects of a debate between Trump and Harris. But of course, in 18 days, we've got the Democratic National Convention up in Chicago, and the Center Square getting that confirmation. We are credentialed. We'll be there on the ground. So be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell with America's Talking Network so you can stay up to date. We'll do live updates each and every morning in Chicago ahead of each day of the DNC and recap all of the happenings from the day before. So be sure to follow along there. So yesterday up in Chicago, former President Donald Trump appeared in front of the National Association of Black Journalists. And of course, it started late. It was supposed to be noon, and then 1 o'clock rolls around, and a little after 1, it finally gets started. But it started off pretty rocky with the ABC moderator asking direct questions about the language he's used to describe people as, animals or monsters if they're prosecutors he doesn't like, or describing certain individuals from the southern border in a certain way, being derogatory towards women. So here's ultimately the way the event started yesterday up in Chicago.
So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country, including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for black workers and black entrepreneurs. I've done so much, and and I say this, historically black colleges and universities were out of money. They were stone cold broke, and I saved them, and I gave them long-term financing, and nobody else was doing it. I think it's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further. I was invited here, and I was told my opponent, whether it was Biden or Kamala, I was told my opponent was going to be here. It turned out my opponent isn't here. You invited me under false pretense. And then you said, you can't do it with Zoom. Well, where's Zoom? She's going to do it with Zoom, and she's not coming. And then you were half an hour late, just so we understand. I have too much respect for you to be late. They couldn't get their equipment working, or something was wrong.
Mr. President, I would love if you can answer the question on your rhetoric and why you believe that black voters should trust you with another 4 years.
I have been the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln.
Better
my answer.
Better than President
That's
Johnson,
my
who signed the
answer.
Voting Rights
And
Act.
for you to start off a question and answer period, especially when you're 35 minutes late because you couldn't get your equipment to work, in such a hostile manner, I think it's a disgrace.
So clearly, things started off that way. We were expecting to hear the panel ask questions for an hour. That didn't happen. The second question out was whether he thinks that Kamala Harris is a diversity, equity, and inclusion hire.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always
But you know
identified
what?
as a black woman.
I
She went to a
respect
historically
either
black
one.
college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you?
So a lot more to say about what Trump discussed with three journalists, part of the National Association of Black Journalists in Chicago. And they talked about the border. They talked about inflation. They talked about prosecutions down in Florida, but he got cut off for that. They also talked about Sonia Massey, which we'll have to unpack later on in a different segment. But let's go ahead and hear what, the last little bit of Trump's presentation when he was asked what would he do on day one.
What do? I close the border. And I do two things, because I can do a lot of things simultaneously. I close the border. We don't want people coming in. We want people to come in, Harris, but they have to be vetted. They have to be checked. They have to come in legally. We want people. I want people to come into our country, but they have to be vetted. They have to be checked. So when you say, what do? That, and I drill, baby, drill. I bring energy way down. I bring interest rates down. I bring inflation way down so people can buy bacon again, so people can buy a ham sandwich again, so that people can go to a restaurant and afford it. Because right now, people can't buy food. Your grocery bills are up 40, 50, 60%.
Some other things he said yesterday was the open border and the flood of illegal immigrants coming to the country are taking black jobs, Hispanic jobs, all jobs. He also went on to say that inflation is killing the American dream for black families and all families. Interest rates are too high. It's hard to get money and so on. So again, the economy and the border were two of the main things that he spoke about to the National Association of Black Journalists in Chicago yesterday, and he wrapped up this way.
Use what we have. I want to bring down prices, bring down costs, and I also have to stop the invasion. And remember, they're taking your jobs. These people coming in are taking your jobs.
Project
Mr. Pres-
2025.
I think we have to leave it there by the Trump team.
All right.
So leave it. That is the last word. Thank you so much, Mr. Trump, for coming today and joining us.
Well, thank you very much.
They've been telling us.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you, everybody, very much.
Again,
Great effort.
that was yesterday, seemed to be cut off short, only about 36 minutes or so that the former president was on the stage taking questions. And of course, a lot of reaction. CNN aired this clip of Kamala Harris talking in response to the former president's comments in Chicago.
And it was the same old show. The divisiveness and the disrespect. And let me just say, the American people deserve better. The American people deserve better.
So again, that's the vice president, who is the presumptive Democratic nominee, providing just a brief reaction, but also Governor J.B. Pritzker on CNN, providing reaction as well. And whether or not Pritzker is going to be a vice presidential pick, he seems to be the not most popular. He's not in the swing states. Illinois is a Democratic state, so will Harris pick a governor or a senator from a swing state to try to draw votes for the Democrat ticket November 5th? All the political postulating going on. Fascinating. We could know Tuesday, I think, is when we could have Kamala Harris announce her running mate. But regardless, Pritzker has been on the national media circuit for quite some time. Here he is talking with Anderson Cooper last night on CNN, disparaging the former president.
This guy is a homophobe, a xenophobe. He's a racist, a misogynist, and he shows it every day. But here was just a perfect example.
And he mentions that the event was actually cut off short. So here's Pritzker talking about how he thinks Trump doesn't have the stamina to go up against Kamala Harris.
He was supposed to answer questions from these 3 black journalists for an hour. He only lasted about 38 minutes. His staff pulled him. I start to wonder whether he's got the stamina to actually get up on a debate stage with Kamala Harris for 90 minutes. He couldn't last today, and he was sitting down. Imagine him standing up for 90 minutes against, frankly, a real grilling by a real prosecutor.
Again, saying that Trump doesn't have the stamina and saying that he was pulled off the stage by his people. Is that what happened here? Going back to some of what Trump had to say, he was talking about how they dropped a case, the documents case down in Florida, and he was trying to talk about the what he calls lawfare against his campaign and himself.
I won the case, and it got very little publicity. I didn't notice ABC doing any publicity on it, George.
We cover you extensively, sir. I'd love to move over onto different topics.
I didn't notice you
now.
do any publicity on it at all. I won the case, the biggest case. This is an attack on a political opponent. I have another one where I have a hostile judge.
We have you for a limited time, sir. I'd love to move on to different topics.
Excuse you. You're the one that held me up at 35 minutes, just so you understand.
Again, you can characterize it one way, or you can characterize it another way. Pritzker saying that Trump doesn't have the stamina to stay on stage for an hour. How can he stand up to Kamala Harris for 90 minutes? Trump iterating several times throughout yesterday's presentation in front of the National Association of Black Journalists that they were late, they couldn't get their equipment together. But then Trump went and rallied in Pennsylvania last night, and he stood on stage, I think, for like 90 minutes in front of 10,000 people, I think. I'm not sure how big the rally was, but he said that there were thousands more outside. Here's just some of what President Trump had to say about his expected Democrat opponent in the November 5th general election.
No matter how much Kamala Harris tries to change her image, she cannot change this fact. She is the most extreme liberal candidate in the history of our country by far. She's an extreme radical left lunatic. The contrast could not be more stark. On the one hand, you have a radical left puppet candidate who is fake, fake, fake. And on the other hand, you have a president who will fight, fight, fight for America.
Fascinating times, and the November election is rapidly approaching. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Thank you so much for taking time with us each and every weekday morning. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and join us each and every weekday morning as we break down the things you need to know to get your day started. All right, follow me anywhere. Just search Bishop on Air. One issue the former president was asked in Chicago dealt with a case happening here in Springfield of a fatal police-involved shooting by a white sheriff's deputy against a black woman. And the former president providing some reaction, especially in the context of his stance on police immunity. Welcome back. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. So last segment, we talked all the back and forth of the politics of former President Trump being in Chicago, Vice President Kamala Harris's reaction, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker's reaction, and then Trump being in Pennsylvania. But back to the conversation he had with the National Association of Black Journalists, he was talking about issues impacting the black communities. Obviously, last segment we talked about his focus on the border, his focus on the economy and inflation out of control. But you had other questions from moderators at the National Association of Black Journalists asking questions about police interactions with the community in particular when it becomes fatal, like we saw of the case July 6th, Sonia Massey in Springfield, calling about a suspected prowler and 2 sheriff's deputies arriving on the scene in response, going into the house and then trying to get ID. Massey goes to the kitchen to take a pot of boiling water off. The one officer, Sean Grayston, says that she needs to put that down, and she says, "You afraid of hot water?" And he goes, "I don't want it in my face." She then says, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." And then he says, "You better not. I'll shoot you in the face." And then all of a sudden, she gets shot in the face. Body camera footage showing that. So it's just a horrible scene, no question. But here's Trump's response to that, especially in the context of his stance on police immunity.
Someone from Illinois, an unarmed black woman, was shot the other day in her home by a deputy sheriff. The deputy has since been charged with murder. You've said police would get immunity from prosecution if you win. Why should someone like that officer have immunity, in your opinion?
Immunity?
Immunity.
I don't know the exact case, but I saw something, and it didn't look good to me. It didn't look good to me. Are you talking with the water, right?
Yeah, well, police unions are not backing this person either.
Okay.
But again, why would...
They're going to be charging the officer. I guess they're charging the officer.
So why should he receive immunity?
Well, he might not. I mean, it depends. It depends on what happens. I'm talking about people that are much different cases than that. We need people to protect ourselves. And by the way, in Chicago, as an example, a few weeks ago, July 4th weekend, they had 117 shootings and 17 deaths. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. We need to have our police officers have the respect and dignity back. In this particular case, I saw something that didn't look good to me. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
So can you get a little more specific back to the immunity question? Who would make those
Well, right now, for the most part, people are protected by their unions, by their police unions, or by their police departments. But I'm saying if I felt, or if a group of people would feel that somebody was being unfairly prosecuted because the person did a good job maybe with crime, or made a mistake, an innocent mistake. There's a big difference between being a bad person and making an innocent mistake. But if somebody made an innocent mistake, I would want to help that person.
What would those exceptions be? What would determine an innocent mistake?
You go after somebody and it's a very close call and it's very dangerous. And you know, they have, the policeman's life and woman is a very difficult thing because sometimes you have less than a second to make a life and death decision. And sometimes very bad decisions are made. They're not made from an evil standpoint, but they're made from the standpoint of they made a mistake.
So the issue of police immunity could be something discussed as well, especially with that very high-profile case of Sonia Massey here in Springfield getting shot and killed by a sheriff's deputy who's been fired, and a lot of questions about his employment record, having worked in even a correctional facility, and a lot of questions there as to his performance and just overall whether or not there were enough red flags to make sure that this guy was not hired by the Sangamon County Sheriff's Office. And Sangamon County Sheriff Jack Campbell facing all kinds of calls for him to step down from his elected position. He's not up for re-election until 2026. But ultimately, he's been, pushing back against those calls while saying what happened was horrible and the justice system's working to provide justice for Sonia Massey. So clearly that's happening. But Congresswoman Nikki Budzinski, a Democrat from Springfield in the U.S. House, she was in Springfield yesterday at an unrelated event, but she was asked about Campbell's position. And she said that, more needs to be hashed out here, and the investigation continues. Even the U.S. Department of Justice is investigating what happened in Springfield with that shooting. But what about the types of reforms there may be? Because President Biden used this tragedy in Springfield to promote passage of the George Floyd Act. It's a police accountability act of sorts in the U.S. Congress. And Congresswoman Budzinski talking about what that could look like.
Well, I think what we need is justice and accountability in this case. I think what you're seeing is local officials have done a good job of expediting the release of the body cam footage. charges against this police officer. I think now we're at a place where we need to do some investigations into how this police officer actually got on the police force and some hard questions related to that. So I think that this is a conversation, the way I look at it, it's in the very beginning stages. But at the end of it, I want to do everything I can to partner with local, state, and federal officials. As you know, the DOJ has also opened an investigation in this case. So anything I can be doing to help ensure that there will be justice and accountability for Sonia. Yes, I mean, yeah, we need to be doing more as it relates to police training. I think one of the pieces of legislation I've actually been very focused on in the House is around de-escalation. I think in this case in particular, you could see the need for more and additional de-escalation training. But I think we need to be partnering with law enforcement to make sure that they're getting the skills training that they need. You know, obviously I don't support things like no-knock warrants, chokeholds. Those are things that were in the George Floyd bill. So I think we need to be doing more, and I'm, you know, very obviously supportive of those efforts.
So Congresswoman Budzinski being asked about those particular issues in the aftermath of the Sonia Massey shooting, and even President Donald Trump being asked about it as well. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, waking you up each and every morning with things you need to know to get your day going, and hopefully you're enjoying it. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell each and every weekday morning. Don't forget, we're going to be on the ground in Chicago for the Democratic National Convention, so for extra updates, be sure to follow along. America's Talking Network on YouTube. Get the Center Squares newsletter from Illinois, and get the national newsletter as well. And be sure to get the podcast, Illinois in Focus Daily. So if you can't watch the live show, you can still get the podcast and follow along. I'm Greg Bishop. Thank you for being here with Illinois in Focus Daily. Got one more segment for you guys. Governor J.B. Pritzker signing a measure into law that is pro-union, and employer groups raising concerns. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. The governor had two events yesterday, one dealing with a worker free speech issue that is pro-union. But again, business groups pushing back on that, but also the governor taking time to highlight the use of sustainable aviation fuel for jets, passenger jets. United joining the governor at Chicago O'Hare to talk about that. But let's go ahead and get into this bill that was signed yesterday by the governor, and that is prohibiting captive audiences, is how they characterize it. Prohibiting captive audiences. So go to thecentersquare.com and follow along here. Pritzker signs captive audience prohibition that employer groups called unconstitutional. And this is some kind of going back a bit, even to this spring, because of Senate Bill 3649. So a measure that makes it a violation for Illinois employers to hold what are called captive audience meetings to discuss religious or political issues is now law. Business groups say it's unconstitutional. Without explaining the measure, the governor signed Senate Bill 3649 Wednesday at a AFL-CIO event. Here is the governor not really explaining the measure, just really rallying labor to discuss all of the different things that they've done in Illinois for the labor movement. Here's the governor.
And workers. We're in a new era for the Illinois economy, one where workers are finally at the center of that economy. From the Pullman strikes to the Haymarket affair to today, it has been the working men and women of this state that have led the charge of progress, not just within the state of Illinois, but across the entire nation. At pivotal moments throughout our history, when civil rights and workers' rights and voting rights and democracy were under siege, it was the Illinois labor movement that answered that call. Illinois workers answered that call. Illinois unions answered that call. Now, today we take another step forward to protect workers in our state.
And again, the governor did not necessarily go into any detail about what he was signing there, just doing it at the AFL-CIO event in Chicago. But going back to earlier this year when they first were discussing this measure in a Senate committee, you had Tim Dre with the AFL-CIO explain in general terms what this measure ultimately does.
Senate Bill 3649 will allow workers to opt out of non-work related meetings called by the employer to discuss political or religious matters. The reasoning behind this proposal is simple. Workers go to work to earn a paycheck and are employed to earn a profit for the employer, not to be indoctrinated by their employer's belief. Again, they go to work for a paycheck and to make a profit for the employer, period, not to be indoctrinated by anyone's religious or political beliefs.
So what does this really come down to? It seems to boil down to that some employers want to hold meetings for their employees to understand what a union could do to the workplace, both maybe positive and negative. But the unions don't want to have employees forced to hear what they say is anti-union propaganda or anti-union rhetoric. So the law says that you can't mandate somebody attend a employer meeting that's going to talk about politics or religion. Now, there are some exemptions they pulled out of there. For instance, the General Assembly as an employer is not impacted by this. So, you know, they've got to deal with politics all the time. And there's nonprofit groups that are exempt from this as well, except for 501c3s, I believe. But regardless, you've got the business groups earlier this month in March talking to a Senate committee about the problems here. The National Federation of Independent Businesses, Noah Finley, says that this is a constitutional violation.
We are not here to debate whether unionization is good or bad. That is for the workers to decide. But to make the decision, they need access to the full range of information, something this legislation would hamper. The threat of civil liability for constitutionally protected speech would place a chilling burden on an employer's freedom of speech, resulting, at best, in self-censorship and reducing employee access to important information and perspectives. One must question how free employers will feel to engage in protected speech with the threat of civil liability hanging over the heads like the famed sword of Damocles. In addition to the chilling burden on protected speech, this legislation also contravenes the National Labor Relations Act, abridging employment.
Ascertain the outcome of the pending legislation so that the parties can have an informed discussion about the proposed language moving forward.
Again, a lot of litigation in other states about this, but as you've got the governor touting a refocus of the economy on the worker, let's talk just briefly about economies here. And Illinois has historically lagged the rest of the nation when it comes to unemployment rate. Just saw some headlines today. Chicago's unemployment rate continues to lag a lot of other big cities. In Illinois, the unemployment rate has ticked a full percentage point up to over the national average regularly. Almost, for instance, back in the Great Recession, it took 10 years plus for Illinois to get back to pre-Great Recession employment. When the pandemic, it took Illinois a little bit longer to get to pre-pandemic levels of employment than other states, and especially states around us. When you talk about the manufacturing inflow and outflow, when you talk about the population inflow and outflow, Illinois' economy definitely has some struggles compared to other states. So a lot can be said about all of this, but of course, just keeping you posted on what's happening in your neck of the woods here in the land of Lincoln. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. Greatly appreciate you guys being here each and every weekday morning. It really is an honor to bring you this type of information from all perspectives and just putting it out there on the table so that you can digest it and make up your own mind. Be sure to go to thecentersquare.com, get the latest headlines from what's happening in Washington, D.C. D.C. to Washington State and right here in the land of Lincoln. But you can also find America's Talking Network on YouTube to wake up with us each and every weekday morning here with Illinois in Focus Daily. Have yourselves a great day. Happy Thursday. Tomorrow's Friday. We'll see you then.
So